Hello, Creep Cole. Welcome to your weekly Patreon bonus episode. I could use a little scalping right now. Anyway, we are continuing with our alphabet roulette, and this week we watched Maniac from 2012, starring Elijah Wood.
Yeah, so we talked last week about the fact that this is a remake of the 1980 version.
Is it Joe Spinell?
Yeah, and directed by William Lustig. And I've seen both. I actually, if you're interested, did an episode with a podcast on Elm Street where we reviewed both of these movies. Will be my second time reviewing this. And yeah, but this is a very different movie than the original, so don't feel like you need to have seen the original to see this. It has like the same DNA, but it's basically just dude who has mommy issues and kills women because of it.
Yeah. So this one's directed by Frank Calhoun and screenplay by Alexander. Is it Aja?
Yeah.
Why is that name sound familiar?
Faja.
He did Hot Tension.
Switchblade Romance.
He has done.
Oh, he did Crawl.
Yeah, he did Crawl
And Horns. Okay. And Piranha 3D. Oh.
Yeah, so he got his start in kind of like the.
Oh, and Mirrors. Poor guy.
Yeah. He got
Had some rough sells.
He got his start in kind of the like extreme cinema with high tension sort of, and I didn't realize that previously having watched Maniac, and I think you can definitely see the influences of that like French extreme. This movie gets under my skin in the same way that those do. Just gets right under my scalp and just peels it right off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like we said before, starring Elijah Wood, Nora Arnzetter, America Olevo, a lot of French people.
Genevieve Alexandra.
It's a pretty much entirely unknown French cast except for Elijah Wood.
I don't know. Is he not a very good actor?
You know, I am not totally sure. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything outside of Lord of the Rings where he.
Because I feel like the character he's playing in this is kind of the same character he plays in Yellow Jackets. Like a little bit less creepy in Yellow Jackets, but still pretty weird.
He tends to play creepy people because, like, Sin City. I mean, obviously, it's a very different kind of character, but a creep.
I thought he was fun. And is it Wilfred? Is that the one with the dog?
Oh,
The show, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think he's a good actor. I think he just tends to play similar types of character. I think in this case, it works because, and this was intentional, the director said in an interview that he wanted to find somebody who had like that boyish, like almost, well, impotent, basically, like this boyish look and kind of charm to him, as opposed to the original where, and the actress even makes a joke about it in this, where when she first meets Elijah Wood's character, she's like, oh, I thought you would be like fat and pimpled and like greasy black hair, and that's a description of what the guy in the original Maniac looks like. But in this, yeah, he's a much more handsome, shy, kind of innocent guy, seemingly. And I think that works better. And a lot of people apparently had a problem with that. And I'm like, do you not know like some of the most famous, influential famous prolific serial killers of all time have been attractive? Like that's how they did what they did.
How they did what they've been doing.
So the basic plot of this movie is Elijah Wood's character. Is it Frank?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. After the director, huh? Anyway, he is a mannequin shop owner.
He restores
in the daytime,
mannequins.
Yeah.
And in the evening, he stalks and kills women, scalps them, and then puts their scalps on the mannequins. And his sense of reality is altered, snapped.
Yeah, and I think that this makes a really good companion piece with Perfect Blue in terms of like the slipping from reality as the movie progresses.
What's cool about this is it's mostly shot as like a first
POV
person movie. Yeah,
and that was the thing that this was like heavily marketed on. I remember when this came out, and this was before I really got into horror movies, and also I think I probably just like didn't have access to seeing this at the time. But I remember everybody was like, "Oh, it's a POV. That's so crazy! Like that's such a new technique." And watching it,
it's not at all. No. Yeah,
but watching it.
There
are a lot of shots where I'm like, damn, it must have been so fucking difficult to pull this off. And they talk a lot in the behind the scenes about how on most movies, because the actors are not constantly because they're not constantly in the scene and having to interact with stuff and everything, most of the time you just need to have the actor there for specific scenes that they're in, and then they can go off and do whatever, and you schedule all around that. But in this case, Elijah Wood for like 95% of the movie had to be there, and also wanted to be there because he wanted to make sure that like he was as involved with how the shots were set up as the director was.
Oh, that's cool.
And a lot of the time was just literally standing behind or next to the cinematographer and just reaching in, and he even had a double who would, because sometimes it was hard for him to reach, around the cinematographer, so he would have a double for a double for his left hand, and he would be the right hand, and they would have to coordinate picking stuff up in front of the camera and
weird,
and doing stuff. So, and there's a lot of mirror shots in this whenever they need to show Elijah Wood and like his state of being, his mental health,
his contemplation.
Yeah, you get like a long mirror shot of him like kind of having a breakdown.
Super cool. Yeah, I think from what I noticed, there was only one shot where then it kind of pulls away from him and like circles around him, and I was like, that's so weird.
Yeah, and occasionally you do get shots that are not in the POV when it's like the what's the character's name, Anna, like her like sometimes walking around town and stuff like that.
Right.
But most of the time, it is from his POV, and I think what that does for this movie is obviously it puts you in Frank's shoes. To me, it feels very claustrophobic. Like you feel like you're trapped inside of his like warped version of reality. So it adds a level of claustrophobia and discomfort to the experience.
Well, because you would make different decisions.
Yeah.
If you were in charge of those hands that use knives to stab people through the chin and steal their scalps, you would make a different decision and maybe not do those things.
Yeah, when he ends up in the apartment with the like tattooed woman, and she's like desperately trying to get him to fuck her, and and in my head I'm like, dude, just fucking just bone her, and I'm like, but I know he's not going to. He's gonna kill her and scalp her.
Yeah,
and it's gonna be gory and dope. I mean, the scalping in this is so fucking disgusting.
It doesn't like cut away.
So I, in my Letterboxd review for this, said that to me this movie is not perfect. It has its faults, but the opening sequence and the ending sequence are so fucking fantastic that to me that just makes up for the faults that the movie has. Like
it's repetitive in the middle where it's like stalk, kill, until we get to the Anna stuff.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what the original Maniac is like, and that's why I don't love that movie, is because to me it's very just kind of boring, repetitive. Like, and there are a lot of people who would disagree with me, and there are a lot of people who don't like this movie because they have such a strong attachment to the original. I don't. So, rewatching, like I just always go back to rewatching this one. But yeah, that opening sequence when he is stalking the woman and finally gets to the front door and just scalps her. You see this big
out in the fucking hallway.
Yeah, out in the hallway, scalps her. She falls out of frame, and
just
then
that quick
Maniac.
like the, phoop, and then
I forgot that.
And then he just like caresses her face.
Yeah, so
don't scream, please.
Yeah, he's like, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful, and then takes her scalp off, and then Maniac. I think the score by Rob. I think
it just says Rob. Yeah.
Is great. It has a very like John Carpenter / like Cliff Martinez in Drive type of feel to it, so it kind of gives a pulse to the whole movie. And then
like bass heavy synth kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then
horror wave.
Spoilers, for the end, but the whole the mannequins coming after him and
peeling his fucking face
tearing
off.
him apart. It looks incredible. The effect is super well done. Like you can barely tell where it's like transitions from being him to being like a CG version of his face. But yeah, that's great and horrifying. And
then it's like, is it supposed to be a mannequin underneath? Because it almost seemed like they ripped off.
Yes, it is intentionally a mannequin.
Yeah,
and the way that they use that throughout the movie, the scene that really stood out to me is when he looks in the mirror and he looks down and he's got like the Ken doll like mannequin parts. To me, it's like that's the way he sees himself because he is impotent because his mom fucked him up so bad mentally that he like can't have a sexual attraction with a woman without it turning violent. And so that's literally him looking down and being like, it's like I don't have a dick. Like my dick is the knife.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think all of that stuff works wonderfully. I think the things that don't necessarily work great, sometimes the POV is disorienting enough that I don't think it helps what the movie is trying to accomplish. There were some scenes where I was just like, okay, if you were gonna sometimes switch out of POV, this might have been a good time to do that.
Agreed.
Also I think the acting in general and the writing is not great, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be. but I think especially from the supporting players around Elijah Wood, I don't think any of the performances are very good. I think the lead actress, I haven't seen her in anything else as far as I know, but she feels very wooden, and that could be because of the writing. But a lot of her lines feel very awkward.
Maybe she's supposed to seem like a mannequin.
Oh.
Yeah, and maybe that's why he's attracted to her. Hey, that could be. That would make sense. And that's the stuff that doesn't really work as much for me. But outside of that, I mean, like I said last week, it's one of my favorite recent horror movies. I know a lot of people feel that it's one of the best horror remakes, I would say, alongside of like an Evil Dead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to, but I enjoyed this one. I mean, outside of like what you said and what we said earlier about the kind of the middle repetition, where I'm just like, let's get on with like a plot. That scene when she finally Anna jumps in that car and like is getting away from him, I was like, good for you.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what the fuck happened, but she just goes through that windshield, and I was like, holy shit! Like, you just fucked yourself up.
Yeah, and then he has this
every opportunity to get out of there.
Yeah, and then he has this like warped idea that like if she had just listened to him and like stayed with him, like would he have killed her? We don't know, but now in his mind he's like, but you should have stayed with me because this wouldn't have happened. It's like, yeah, but
and that kind of finally pushes him over the edge, right? If we think that's why the ending happens, he like loses it over her dying because he didn't want her to die. He wanted to finally be with somebody.
Yeah, I think it was the closest that he had ever gotten to like a genuine relationship with someone. Like he maybe saw that there was some potential that realistically was never there. Like really there's not a lot of indication that she necessarily reciprocates his feelings.
Well, in the apartment a little bit when he starts massaging her and she's like, oh yeah, but then she's like, I can't.
But to me that felt very like
taking advantage
of somebody. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people who are in an emotionally compromised situation like that would be like, I'm gonna, fuck the pain away, and it's him kind of taking advantage of that moment, and it felt very dirty to me. So,
yeah, and the whole movie kind of just made me sad because like shit like that happen. I mean, maybe not the scalping and to the extent of how extreme this gets, but like women get stalked like all the time. Like that shit sucks.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was.
It would be awful to be a woman, I think.
Well, yeah, beyond the gory stuff, the scalping, that's the stuff that really gets under my skin is the just knowing that this is like this is real life. Like this is,
it's not far-fetched in any way, shape, or form.
It's very realistic. Yeah, and so I was like, that's what I'm having.
That's
a hard
why
time
the scalping
watching.
and stuff works so well outside of the actual practical makeup effects is because it feels so just like straightforward and brutal and real. And that's where the performances I think do shine is the women in distress. Like you feel scared for them, and you obviously like it's tragic, and yeah, that stuff made me very sad, and just like the dread of knowing it was coming too. Like every time he would start to like get, be stalking a woman or getting close to a woman, I'd be like, oh fuck, even though I know it was gonna happen, and that's what I'm here for. That's what I signed up for. But I think that's what makes it effective.
I think it's hard when watching a film where like the majority of the content is like sexualized violence in that way, because in reality, as much as this character is impotent and is not able to like proceed with like losing his virginity because of how fucked he is in the brain, like you said before, the knife is essentially his dick, so he is penetrating, and it, like I said, based on him choosing specific types of victims and things like that, it is a very sexualized crime.
Well, and you get the backstory in these little flashbacks, which also got under my skin. Like, just anything with kids being abused, which is something that we'll talk about with our main movie in our main episode. But yeah, any of that stuff really gets to me. And so, the obviously the neglectful mother thing is something that's very personal to me. So I was in close to tears in a couple of those scenes. And that's sad because that's also a thing you hear from a lot of these men who commit these crimes, is that they had a terrible relationship with their mother and they were neglected and they saw their mom bringing in men constantly. And because of the whole Oedipal, you're kind of forming a sexuality, and the only woman in your life that when you're that young is your mom. And if you're seeing your mom constantly being sexual and being roughly sexual with many men, it's going to give you a very warped sense of sexuality and violence. And but it's hard to feel sympathetic for a character that does such horrific things. Mm-hmm. So but because it's Elijah Wood, I think it helps to be like, I do, as much as I don't want to, I feel sorry for him.
I want to see you get the ring to Mordor.
Well, and I know a lot of people's complaints with this movie and with a lot of movies like this is that it's just like, oh, it's more women being tortured and murdered,
Victimized.
and victimized. But it's not like the end of this movie is telling you that it's gonna end, that it ends well for him. He's not like a Jason Voorhees, where you're rooting for him like a hero at the end. Like, it's sad. He's fucking dead, and he would have been arrested anyway, and it was the end of the road for him, and everything got destroyed around him, and the whole movie he's just living in a fucking nightmare.
And the SWAT, it was there, like the police were there, right? Because then they were like frozen.
No, they show up and he's like dead, right?
But they didn't move, so I was like, are they mannequin? I don't know. For a second I was like, is this real?
Yeah, it could be like his last bits of consciousness, like turning them almost into mannequins, like in the scene. I just liked the way it was staged. Like, I liked the way that they all froze like that. It gave it like an added little bit of weight at the end. But
pluses, minuses for you?
I mean, I think that the subject matter makes it difficult to watch, and especially considering you are literally forced to be in the shoes of the killer, that makes it hard to stomach. But it is very stylish, and I think that that's where it gains a lot of ground for me. It's not, like you said, it's not perfect, but I think the style factor of it definitely gets me a lot more on board. I would watch it again, but I know that it's, like I said, I need to be in the right mood, because the actual specific subject matter is very hard to swallow.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I do think that the POV thing is cool. I would be interested in seeing like other people. I mean, there are other movies like that, but other movies
a lot,
doing,
especially back in the day. Is the original one like that? So that's why they did it?
No. So,
okay.
But I mean, going back to like Peeping Tom, like that's the main inspiration for this. And they say it in interviews. They're like, yeah, Peeping Tom was our main inspiration for doing it this way. And it actually made me want to go back and rewatch Peeping Tom, which is a movie that also gave me a very similar feeling of being really uncomfortable, of being in the killer's shoes.
Because even the Friday the 13th, it's all POV killer.
Yeah, in the first one, yeah.
Well, and there are some shots from the original Halloween that are POV. I think that specifically Halloween, it's easier to stomach a lot of that because it doesn't feel as like sexual in nature. It's just, as you find out through that series, a force of evil that can't be stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also am just always a sucker for a movie that uses sound design and the camera to convey like the way they do his migraines in this, where like everything, the exposure of everything gets super heightened and everything's crazy bright, and you have like the ringing, and it's like, I don't get migraines, but from what I've heard from people who do, that's what it feels like, is like everything just gets like any small amount of light is too much. But yeah, overall, I totally agree with what you guys said. Like, I had forgotten how truly disturbing this movie was. I had a memory of it being just more like, yeah, it's a fun, good scalping time, and now I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna need
could have been based on the company that you spoke about it with, maybe.
Yeah,
because they definitely are a little more fast and loose with their enjoyment of that.
Well, I'm sure, like,
film.
somebody like Ben from Extreme Horror would be like, oh, this is Baby Town Frolics over here. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it. I wasn't really sure if you were going to, and I think like the style of this and the music and it being Elijah Wood is like, it basically was made for my sensibilities. So I wasn't sure how you guys were going to feel about it, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, I would say so.
Cool.
All right, great. So we want to get the next one picked. So we're moving on to N, obviously, and we're going to head over to the Wheel of Endless Possibilities. Right?
Really 3, but...
Yeah, but it could be.
But I could have.
Yes, so John's picking.
I picked Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Yep, and I went with... Remind me, I forgot already.
You went with Naked Lunch?
I went with Naked Lunch.
And I went with Nosferatu the Vampire.
Yeah. Let's give it a spin.
Come on, Naked Lunch. It's been on our list for years at this point.
Yeah.
We're going with Nosferatu the Vampire.
Oh, okay. This was also on my list, so no disappointment for me. Actually, I think they all 3 were.
I've seen the original, but I have not seen the remake. If anybody who is watching this or you guys are interested, Joe Bob did do a Last Drive-In episode for the remake. Okay. So if you want to get some...
This is the remake, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is
Werner Herzog.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we'll have watched any Werner Herzog for the show.
See is a vampire.
Well, I guess technically he's in The Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian. But yeah, so I'm very excited to check this out. Yeah, and if you want to dedicate like 3 hours to it, check out the Last Drive-In one. That's probably how I'm going to do it. But yeah.
Cool. Well, that's what we're doing next week. If you haven't already, please check out our regular episode where we're wrapping up anime and talking about Belle.
Yeah.
So we're going to see you next week, and that's what we're watching.
Keep it creepy.
Keep it hella creepy.
Thanks for your fucking money.